First of all, how is that ethanol industry doing? This has been a challenging year for that industry, just as it has for many others. I asked the question of the founder and CEO of POET, Jeff BROIN.
Well, obviously, the COVID-19 crisis caused some slowdown in production. The industry hit about half production capacity, which also damaged some corn demand. But we're back running about 90% capacity. I think the industry is going to be fine long term.
How do the exports affect your business? In other words, is that a strong sector that really helps prop up the industry during challenging times domestically?
Well, exports certainly are part of what we do. It's not a large portion, a few percent of what we do, under 10. The thing about exports is countries like to put on tariffs and tariff us out of their markets. So it's not a very reliable source of demand. So to really move corn and commodities into the fuel markets, it needs to be domestic to be reliable.
And we've had some forward steps and some backward steps in recent years. First of all, let's accentuate the positive. What has been some good news over the past year, a couple of years on the ethanol front?
Well, without question, we're moving toward E15. Unfortunately, it's not happening as quickly as we'd like. We've been battling the oil companies. They do not want to give up market share. We've been battling our own EPA. Our own EPA has tried to stop cleaner fuels, which quite frankly amazes me. And I see farmers out there hurting and struggling, and they need more biofuels. Exports have been flat for 30 years. Exports really haven't changed, about 2 billion bushels a year for 30 years. But a move from E10 to E15 could be another 2 billion bushels of annual grain demand, basically equaling all of exports today, just that one move. So it's critical that our nation moves to E15. The farmer needs more of the gas tank to get out of the slump that they're in right now.
The Environmental Protection Agency wields a mighty stick. I mean, that EPA administrator can have a dramatic effect, he or she, can they not, on the ethanol business?
Absolutely, and unfortunately, it seems the ones that end up in that role have a history of being employed by the oil industry or consultants to the oil industry, and they're friends with the oil industry. So we need to move some people into those roles that are friends of agriculture, and I think you'll see a totally different situation. And obviously, EPA is trying to help climate change, right, and help clean the toxins in the air. What better product than ethanol to help clean the air and help slow and reverse climate change? We have to get back to our agricultural roots if we're serious about climate change.
Those small refinery exemptions have been so frustrating to you folks in the industry and to the producers who grow the crops as well. We still haven't made up for those losses, have we?
Absolutely. That was a couple billion bushels of demand destruction right there. So significant destruction of commodity demand, which affects corn, soybeans, wheat, all commodities really worldwide. And so not only has that been hard on the U.S. farmers, but hard on the worldwide farmer as well.
What would you say to that grower who produces the corn, as well as Main Street rural America that relies heavily upon the producers of the crops that go into our biofuels? I mean, is this a time when they need to really be making some contact here and saying, hey, this is important to us?
Absolutely. We're 30 days from a presidential election, from an election cycle. They need to make their voices heard. They need to let our politicians know, our presidential candidates know that E15 is the answer to the future of rural America. It's what we need short term. Long term, we'll need more. But for the next decade, we need E15 to really straighten up the economies of rural America and get things back on track.
Doesn't that environmental contribution get lost in the discussion sometimes, Jeff? I mean, we talk about it being important to rural America. We talk about it historically. We used to talk about the fact that it supplanted imported oil, but really the environmental contribution is a mighty one, isn't it?
It is. Today we're about 44% cleaner than gasoline. That's including something called indirect land use change, which really isn't happening. So really we're about 65% cleaner than gasoline if you take that out of the equation. On our way to 100%. The only thing that makes agriculture not perfectly in sync with nature is the fact we're using petroleum to run the tractors and the trucks. We're using petroleum-based fertilizers and chemicals. So once again, petroleum is the problem. Agriculture is the solution. I think we need to let our politicians know that and to really drive that home.
What do you say to folks who maybe look at the industry with a critical eye and they say ethanol's time is past? How do you answer that, Jeff?
it amazes me because there is only one way. If we're worried about the planet, we're worried about climate change, we're worried about toxins in our air, there's only one way to solve it, and that's agriculture. I think people need to realize that we have to get our energy and our products from the surface of the earth. When we take that 50 million year old oil out of the ground and pump it in the environment, it's very, very hard to get rid of it again. If we work on the surface of the earth, on top of the earth, and through agriculture, we can be in sync with nature.
Jeff BROIN with Poet. His comments there, Mike, remind me of how much power the EPA administrator has. I've said sometimes he or she wields as much power as the Ag Secretary.